The Last Duel, a medieval take on a very old story that we've seen in the modern day in British cinemas. But what are my thoughts about the film, and is it actually any good with such a star-studded cast? Let's find out, and let's get into it. The Last Duel encompasses a sort of pulp fiction-like story, sharing differing views from differing people and like sort of merging an amalgamation of story together in order to form a sort of lengthy narrative. The film itself is very, very long. It comes in at the sort of 2.5 hour mark, and for the most part it's enjoyable. But to be honest, for the first 45 minutes I was sitting in my chair almost half asleep. Besides that, I really did enjoy the film. I think past the sort of 45-minute mark, once we've seen Matt Damon's sort of backstory and narrative sort of structure, obviously we do need that to have the fundamentals of his character's story and really know what he's like and understand his sort of behaviours and sort of emotional attachment to other characters. But it wasn't really that compelling. It didn't excite me in the rest of the way the film did. So like I said, once you get past that 45-minute mark and it gets a little bit more progressive into the rest of the narrative, you do really enjoy the sort of story that's put in place. It follows from differing sort of views. So there is the 3-act structure, and we see the story told in 3 different ways. So the first part of the story is told from Matt Damon's narrative sort of side, and then once we've had that format, we then get the other format. So in Act 2, we see Adam Driver's narrative. So the way in which Adam Driver perceives the events and the sort of shifts and changes. In that way, it's very like Pulp Fiction because we've retold the story from a different way and we see a different angle and perspective. It kind of extends it a little bit more in The Last Duel because it really changes the tonality. So once we see Adam Driver's narrative, spoiler alert, he does actually rape Jodie Corner's character. And then when we see Jodie Corner's perspective, we see that she's so much more emotional. She's distraught by the events. She, certain aspects of the event, so she runs up the stairs and her shoes fall off because they like slip off as she's running so quickly. Whereas in Adam Driver's perspective, we see her politely take her shoes off and sort of invite him upstairs. So it shows a sort of contrast and it's very, very, very interesting. It also poses sort of wider questions to the way women are represented in a medieval sort of society and time period. Obviously, their gender is obviously seen as a lesser, but it also is reflective upon sort of the male dominant characters. I remember just sitting there watching the film and they're doing like the trial, so asking her if she enjoyed the experience. And obviously that throws into the account what actually went on. It is based on a true story, loosely based on a true story, written by someone. But I mean, the way in which the medieval times present females and the sort of relationship men have on the dominant nature against females is just disgusting. They literally sit there and say to her, "Oh, it can't be Adam Driver's baby because you did not have pleasure during sex." It makes no sense. If you're being raped, you're obviously not going to feel pleasure, and how does it constitute as having a kid? It's all a little bit confusing, and you really do need to watch the film and understand like how aggravated I am in terms of the things that are presented within the film. Once you sort of get this 3-act structure, it kind of strays a little bit because obviously what we do is we have at the very start of the film, you see a snapshot of the 2 guys, so Matt Damon's character and Adam Driver's character going into battle in the Last Duel, and then it cuts away and starts retelling the story in the flashback sort of format. But once we clear the 3rd act and see Jodie Corner's depiction of it, it actually shifts into sort of a multiverse, a multi-aspect approach in terms of showing just a story without a single sort of narrative perception. And then we get to see Matt Damon eventually, spoiler alert, killing Adam Driver in a brutal way after they've fought on their horseback, and then they're stabbing each other, they're slicing each other. And it is a very, very interesting take. But yet again, it throws into sort of like narrative devices and stuff The fact that if Matt Damon would have lost that battle, Jodie Comer's character would have died because she would have been seen as falsifying information, because no one trusts a female that leads an accusation against another man, which I just find just so disheartening and just rude, and it just doesn't sit well with me. And as a side note as well, minus the sort of narrative arc and structure, there are so many famous people within the film. You've got people like Matt Damon, obviously. You've got Ben Affleck that appears. Looks very, very different to what he's got with his blonde hair. You've got Adam Driver, which you would have seen in Star Wars. Jodie Comer, most recently seen in Free Guy. And then a few other people. There's a guy that was in Rocket Man. He was in there as well. He was one of the friends of Adam Driver's character. And there are also other few people. But I kind of think that you should play like Where's Wally in terms of finding the actors when you go to watch it yourself. The final thing that I want to talk about is actually the sort of critical reception and box office gross. To be honest, this film has had a really, really good critical reception, and that's why I decided to go and watch it. It's pretty much scored pretty highly. It's got above a 70, almost an 80% on Metacritic, really high on IMDb, and also shares the same sort of things with Google. That will vary in sort of timings. Obviously, this is just been recorded on the 23rd of October, so as it progresses and more people see it, that will slightly change, but that's just as a sort of footnote. But with the sort of ratings and reviews being so high, let's just encompass that with the box office gross. This film has been an utter flop. It has not done well at all at the domestic and the international box office, mainly because it's facing such stark competition with all of these other films. As I mentioned, and in a review, there's Halloween Kills that I've seen. That has done pretty well at the box office. And there is also the massive James Bond film, No Time to Die, that has been at the box office as well, and that has absolutely crushed it, which has kind of put this film, The Last Duel, in a sort of shadowed approach. They can't get the audience in, or they can't get the numbers in, because these other films are sort of stealing it. And I think also it's depicted in the topic of the film. How many people are actually going to watch a medieval film? I don't really know. I was a little bit apprehensive as well going into it. But I have really enjoyed the film, and I would highly suggest recommending watching it, basically, at the end of the day. It's got to be a filmy film, as that sounds really, really weird in saying it, but you have to enjoy your film to really want to stay in the cinema. Like I said, 45 minutes in, I was almost willing to leave, but I did actually stick through and end up finishing it. But that's been all for today's video. If you like these videos and like me sharing my opinion with you guys, please hit like, because that really helps the channel out. Please hit subscribe as well to see more of these reviews, and I will hopefully see you guys in the next one. Thank you very, very much for watching. See you later. See ya.